the Smithsonian received a mysterious collection from Johnny Carson's estate in 2005. It stayed sealed for 20 years. Museum curators finally opened it last month. What they discovered inside made them question everything. Personal tapes Carson recorded in his final years, confessions he never meant anyone to hear, and evidence of the betrayal that destroyed his family forever. Carson left clues about why he chose revenge over forgiveness. The collection proves the man America loved was hiding something devastating, something that changes television history. Johnny Carson came into the world on October 23, 1925, in a place so small most people had never heard of it. Corning, Iowa. His father, Homer Kit Carson, worked for the Iowa-Nebraska Light and Power Company, which meant the family never stayed in one place for long. They moved constantly through Ioka, Clarinda, and Red Oak, finally settling in Norfolk, Nebraska, when Johnny was 8. That move happened in 1933, right in the middle of the Great Depression. Just a few years earlier, during the roaring 1920s, it had felt like America was invincible. But by the time Johnny could understand the world around him, everything was broken. His father's salary was cut by nearly 40%. Neighbors were losing their farms. Families were selling furniture just to buy bread. Their house in Norfolk was only 1,500 square ft. For a child, it wasn't the size of the house that mattered. It was the weight of silence at the dinner table when there wasn't enough to go around. And when your mother is more cold than kind, and your older siblings are louder and stronger. A boy like Johnny needed something else to hold on to. At 8 years old, he found it, a dusty magic book at a friend's house. It pulled him in so hard he could barely breathe until he had a magic kit of his own. He scraped together coins from chores and mailed away for one. When it arrived, it didn't just give him tricks, it gave him power. He became the Great Carson and started performing for anyone who would watch. He charged 10 cents per trick, more than a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk cost in 1933. His mother didn't praise him. His brothers mocked him. But magic gave him something no one else would control. He practiced until his hands were blistered. Practiced jokes. Practiced the delivery. Magic filled his room, his head, his silence. By the time he was 10, he was getting hired for birthdays around town. But it wasn't until he turned 14 that something happened that would shape the rest of his life. In 1939, the Norfolk Rotary Club booked him for a real show. Not kids, not neighbors, adults in suits. He attempted a levitation trick. It failed completely. The assistant moved too early. The props were off. It could have been a disaster. For most kids, it would have been. But Johnny laughed. He made the room laugh with him. He turned the failure into a joke and they gave him a standing ovation. Not for the magic, but for the recovery. They paid him anyway, and they booked him again. What he learned that night was bigger than a trick. When things fall apart, if you can still make people laugh, they'll follow you anywhere. But back at home, the laughter stopped. His mother, Ruth, was a different kind of wound. She acted on local stages, but at home she acted like her youngest son didn't matter. He later called her Lady Macbeth and the toughest son of a Bion of them all. She didn't like boys, said they were dirty, and never hid her disappointment in him. Even after he sent her and his father on an expensive European tour, something that cost around $15,000 in the 1970s. Her only comment when she returned was, "It's good to be home." When he gifted her a mink coat, she mailed it back, saying it was too fancy. When she died, Johnny didn't mourn. On TV, he said, "The Wicked Witch is dead." And people laughed, not knowing how much truth was in that joke. He blamed her for his 3 failed marriages and said she was the reason he didn't know how to love properly. No award, no applause, no money ever filled that hole. By age 7, Johnny was working. Not pretend work, real work. Delivering newspapers, doing yard chores, picking up odd jobs. In the mid-1930s, 50 cents a day meant the difference between lights staying on or not. He knew what it meant to make money matter. That fear of losing it never left. Even when he was making $5 million a year in the 1980s, he wouldn't pick up dinner checks. Friends said he hoarded money. Psychologists said it was Depression-era trauma. Johnny just said nothing. He never forgot the sound of neighbors getting evicted or the look in his dad's eyes when a paycheck came late. He wasn't just the youngest child. He was the invisible one. His sister Catherine and brother Dick always seemed to shine brighter. Dick went on to direct TV shows, the same world Johnny would one day dominate. But in their childhood, Dick was the confident one. Johnny was quiet, hesitant, careful. Ruth favored the older siblings, or at least she criticized them less. For Johnny, it meant growing up in shadows. That shadow followed him. He needed approval like air. Compliments made him uncomfortable. He never believed he was enough, no matter how many people told him otherwise. And yet, that hunger pushed him to outshine them all. High school didn't dull his spark, it just added mischief. He became the prank king of Norfolk Senior High. A teacher's bike ended up on the flagpole. A goat appeared on the school roof. A cow was somehow led upstairs into the chemistry lab and stayed there overnight. And then there was the rotten egg bomb that forced a school evacuation. Each prank was bold, complex, and hilarious. It wasn't just chaos. It was creativity in disguise. a rehearsal for live TV, long before cameras ever rolled. By 14, he was performing paid gigs. He had a ventriloquist dummy named Eddie. He made fun of teachers on stage, got laughs, got detention, but he kept going. After Pearl Harbor, patriotism was everywhere, and Carson's sharp wit gave people a reason to smile during heavy times. He started performing at churches and community centers. The kid who once practiced alone in his room was now entertaining full crowds. In 1943, he graduated and enlisted in the Navy at 18. He joined the USS Pennsylvania as a communications officer, decoding Japanese messages during World War II. He wanted combat, but never saw it. Instead, he entertained the crew with magic tricks in the Met. In 1945, Secretary of the Navy James Forstall visited the ship, and Johnny performed a card trick that left an impression. Officers encouraged him to pursue entertainment. That moment stayed with him. He performed on Guam, on islands, in tents, anywhere he could. War didn't give him medals. It gave him a stage. When he got home in late 1945, he went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He studied radio and speech, wrote comedy sketches, and analyzed Jack Benny and Bob Hope routines for his senior thesis. It wasn't just a student project, it was a blueprint, a 45-minute audio presentation titled How to Write Comedy for Radio. Even then, he wasn't winging it. He was studying the rhythm, the timing, the science behind the laugh. After graduating in 1949, he landed a $50 a week job at WOW Radio in Omaha. He hosted the morning show, read the news, performed skits, and once joked about interviewing courthouse pigeons about political corruption. His ad-libs were so sharp they irritated the bosses, but the audience loved them. He even did magic for side income. Omaha noticed, then Hollywood did too. That same year, on October 3, 1949, he married Jody Walcott. They honeymooned in LA, and that trip changed everything. He landed a job writing slapstick for the Red Skelton Show. Pie gags, pratfalls, all personally approved by Skelton. Carson was suddenly writing in Hollywood, but money was tight. They lived in a cramped apartment with their baby boy, Christopher. Long hours, new pressures, big dreams. In 1951, he hosted a TV game show called Skit and Scrabble. It was cheap, silly, and unpredictable. He once described an Arvar as a vacuum cleaner for ants. Ratings went up, but producers wanted control. Johnny didn't follow the script. He got fired. The show didn't last, but his voice stayed in people's heads. In 1953, he moved to Hollywood for real, hosting Carson's Cellar on CBS's KNXT TV. Low budget, dim lights, simple skits, but it gave him freedom. Celebrities started noticing. A young Steve Allen even guest starred for free. The apartment was still small. The bills still piled up, but something was building. By 1954, he was writing for CBS's The Johnny Carson Show at $250 per week. He joked about Eisenhower's golf obsession, sparking his first censorship fight. He learned to walk the line. Funny but careful, smart but safe. That skill would save him more than once. In 1955, Johnny Carson was still unknown to most of America when he took over a variety show called The Johnny Carson Show, AIRED, Thursday nights at 1:00 p.m. Eastern. From the Vine Street Theater in Los Angeles, each episode ran just 30 minutes and tried to compete with more polished Bignum productions. The show was a chaotic blend of comedy, music, and awkward sketches directed by 7 different people and written by 8. Ratings were awful. Sponsors fled, and yet, in one unscripted moment when a stage piano collapsed mid-scene, Carson ad-libbed with such charm that the audience erupted in laughter. He pretended to fight with the piano like it was alive. That kind of improvisation was nearly unheard of in 1950s television. Though the show lasted only 39 weeks, ending in March 1956, it quietly hinted at the magic Carson would later unleash on late night. By 1957, Carson had relocated to Los Angeles and took a new job at KBC, hosting a quirky game show called Who Do You Trust on ABC. It aired at 3:30 p.m. every weekday, tucked right between teen favorite American Bandstand. Instead of dry trivia, the show thrived on Carson's flirtatious chemistry with co-host Janice Page and his unusual choice to let contestants whisper their answers to him. This created a sense of intimacy that was new for daytime TV. The format featured 3 couples competing for cash with winners returning daily and teenagers rushing home from school to catch it. From 1957 to 1963, Who Do You Trust was a surprise hit, and Carson's subtle wit began catching national attention. But he wasn't always safe. During one episode, he spilled coffee on set and mocked the sponsor's detergent, saying it could probably clean up the mess. The audience laughed. The sponsor didn't. Behind the scenes, there were threats of cancellation. Carson defended himself publicly, saying if the product really worked, the joke wouldn't hurt. The New York Times covered the debate, and although it was risky to poke fun at advertisers back then, the incident showed America something new. A TV host unafraid to be honest. NBC noticed. In 1960, Carson began guest hosting The Tonight Show for Jack Paar. When Parr suddenly walked off the show in 1962 over a political dispute, NBC panicked. Carson filled in that night. He delivered a calm, confident monologue, joking that the control room was putting out fires with a hose. Viewers loved it. That single night proved to NBC that Carson could lead the ship. By October 1962, he officially took the reins. But Carson had one condition. He demanded full creative control over his opening monologue. He wanted to write his own jokes. That freedom let him poke fun at major figures like when he skewered Nixon's emotional checkers speech. It was more than comedy. It was cultural commentary, and it set the tone for late-night TV as a place where the news could be laughed at, without losing its weight. Carson's influence was now shaping the medium itself. When The Tonight Show debuted under his command on October 1, 1962, it was chaotic. The NBC studio in New York was packed with tension. The orchestra failed. The set malfunctioned. Crew members were so nervous they reportedly wet themselves backstage. Carson pretended to cry during his intro, saying he wanted his Nana. But 7.7 million people watched that night. Mel Brooks, Tony Bennett, and Groucho Marx were among the guests. NBC had been bracing for disaster, but Carson's nervous charm disarmed everyone. The 105-minute episode went down in TV history, though only audio recordings and scattered photos survived. The original tapes were wiped. 2 years later, in 1964, Carson invited UFO believer George Adamski onto the show. Adamski brought a photo he said proved aliens from Venus had visited him, but Carson, who had studied magic, came prepared. He used toy props and smoke machines to expose the holes in the story. He never humiliated the man outright. Instead, he used comedy to gently dismantle a lie. The audience got the message. Late night could be fun, but it could also think. That same year, Carson convinced NBC to move The Tonight Show to Burbank, California. He didn't want to work Fridays. NBC refused. The union demanded 5 workdays. Carson refused again. A production strike shut the show down for a week. Viewers were furious, but NBC caved. Carson won the right to work only 4 days a week. The show adopted a looser West Coast vibe with more celebrity guests, but the battle scarred his relationship with the network. Carson's authority was growing. So was the tension. Later in 1964, Carson's jokes took aim at singer Wayne Newton. Again and again, he mocked Newton's appearance and voice. Newton was confused, then angry. In 1980, he stormed into Carson's office and threatened to fight him. The jokes stopped, but Carson didn't forget. Years later, when Newton bought the Aladdin Hotel, Carson spread mob rumors about him on air. Newton sued NBC for $5.2 million and won, though the ruling was overturned in 1990. Their feud lasted until Carson's death in 2005. One of the longest-running grudge matches in show business. Carson made other missteps, too. In 1966, he produced a pilot called The Pet Set, where celebrities appeared with their animals. In one episode, a chimpanzee urinated during taping, soaking the set and causing mayhem. Carson was humiliated. He realized then that hosting was one thing, producing was another. He scaled back, but the chimp story became a running gag, proof that even the king of late night wasn't safe from chaos. That same year, he introduced Karnak the Magnificent, a mystical psychic in a feathered turban who gave ridiculous answers to unseen questions. Audiences howled. Ed McMahon's booming intro line became iconic, and jokes like Sis Boomba made Karnak a staple. Each gag came wrapped in wordplay, cultural satire, and physical comedy. One night, Carson tripped on the set and crashed through his desk, and they kept it in the show. It became a signature bit. May the bird of paradise fly up your nose. Started as a Karnak curse and became a Billboard hit. It was silly. It was smart. It was Carson. In 1971, Carson introduced Art Fern in the Tea Time movie skits. A greasy pitchman in a tube hawking fake products like beat up old cars and keep washing your hair. Every segment ended with a joke about taking the Slozen cut off, then cutting off your It was absurd, edgy, and wildly popular. Carol Wayne, who played the matinee lady, was beloved by viewers. When she died in 1985, Carson took the sketch off the air for a year. Behind the jokes was grief. In 1972, Carson hosted President Gerald Ford and handed him a golf club as a prop. Ford knocked over a mic. Carson quipped, "That's Ford's foreign policy in action." The joke went viral before viral existed. It was light, but it carried a sting. And Ford, to his credit, laughed with the rest of America. Carson's political jokes walked a razor's edge, but rarely drew blood. That's why they worked. In 1973, Stump the Band debuted. Viewers asked the NBC orchestra to play bizarre songs like My Dead Dog Rover when they failed. Carson fined them $5. It became a running joke. Musical goofiness met comedic sharpness, and the crowd couldn't get enough. By the mid-70s, Carson's empire was undeniable. He earned $4 million a year, about $19 million today. He turned down the lead in Blazing Saddles and stayed loyal to TV. In Vegas, he performed, even with a sore throat from chain smoking, drawing 20,000 fans in 1976. Tickets sold out instantly. He owned his production company, he owned his time. He owned the night. Sometimes it got weird. On December 17, 1969, Carson aired the wedding of Tiny Tim and Miss Vicky, live on The Tonight Show. The set was packed with 10,000 tulips. Carson toasted the couple with milk and honey instead of champagne, respecting Tiny Tim's religious beliefs. The episode drew 45 million viewers. It was the highest-rated late-night broadcast ever, but afterward Carson mocked it privately, calling it a circus. Miss Vicky was only 17. They divorced 8 years later. The tape is mostly gone, but the moment remains frozen in pop culture. In 1973, Carson was sued by model Marilyn Hummer, who said he fathered her child in 1968 during his marriage to Joanne. The case was quietly settled for $25,000. Years later, his lawyer, Henry Bushkin, confirmed it in a memoir. The story had been buried, but it hinted at Carson's complex double life. The careful image on screen and the messy one off it. In 1982, he was arrested in Beverly Hills for DUI. His blood alcohol level was 6. He lost his license. That night, he went on air and made a joke with a real police officer by his side. Johnny Carson had spent decades perfecting the image, a calm, charming man behind a desk, always ready with a quip. But behind that polished smile was a storm he couldn't laugh away. The drinking had started quietly, tucked into long nights and lonely dressing rooms. By the time he was married to Joanne Copeland, it was harder to hide. When he found out about her affair with Frank Goffard in 1979, he didn't just react privately. On set, he snapped. A piece of furniture shattered. The show was delayed. Producers panicked. He was spiraling, and everyone close to him could see it. The pressure of keeping The Tonight Show alive every night didn't help. His jokes sometimes came out sharp, sometimes bitter. When 60 Minutes interviewed him in 1977, he admitted flat out, "I don't handle alcohol well at all." But he didn't stop. He kept drinking. He'd sometimes have to sober up right before stepping in front